Hello, everybody. Welcome to Confessions of a Facilitator with facilitators and their favorite tools. For those of you who don't know me yet, well, my name is Selena, and today I have the pleasure, the leisure, and the excitement of having as a guest Trina Rice. Yoo-hoo! Certified facilitator with Access Consciousness. And for those of you who don't know what Access Consciousness is, well, you'll get my picture of it, this huge box of tools where you go, you pick one, and then you change your life by magic on one condition that you choose to change it. So, before you get to speak, I speak a lot, but before you get to tell us some things, there are two rules to go by, okay? Get serious about that. That's the moment of we get serious. So the first rule is we have fun.
No fun, no.
We can't, right? Second rule would be apply rule number 1. So when we fail to have fun, then we go to rule number 2 and we apply rule number 1. Okay? Pretty easy, right? Pretty easy. I mean, we don't have to complicate stuff, right? Cool. So now, Trina. Who are you? I don't know where to look, but I look everywhere. So who are you? And what's your favorite tool?
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Actually, one of my favorite tools to use is who.
I'm listening. I'm like,
is who am I being? And if
this busts out my questions. I mean, like, we had rules, we have regulations here. Hey, where's my form, my structure, my linearity, my building up the plot, Trina?
If I were being me, who would I be? Oh,
yeah.
So actually, it is one of my favorite tools to use, because when you become so aware of like the energies and everything around you and aware of where everybody else is functioning, sometimes it's like an onslaught of like so much information, and it feels like swimming in like a cesspool, you know, like, oh, how do I get out of here? And when you're so used to that, we have a really difficult time being able to clarify, like, okay, is that actually me, or am I picking up on somebody else, or am I aware of everybody else's stuff? And if I was actually choosing for me, what would I choose? So I have realized over time how much I am so aware of everybody else and their world and their reality that I often forget who I be with all of that. So one of the tools that's helped me immensely is asking, okay, if I were being me with this in like any particular situation, who would I be? What would I be? Yeah. And what would I choose?
So if I were really me, who would I be? It's like, are you actually, do you get to choose who you are, or is this something that helps you somehow identify up to where it's you and where the others started? My brain. I'm like, my brain. Okay, tell me.
So, okay, there's so many times, like, as I'm like going through the day, and I could be in a really awesome space, and then I go somewhere, I do something, and I just start to feel like super crunchy or super enclosed in, or like really heavy, like something's on my chest or on my shoulders, and it's that pressure. And like a lot of times I say, I think my shoulders are in my eyeballs. Because you get so like, oh
yeah.
And in those moments, I've learned to ask, okay, if I were being me with this, who would I be? Or who am I being? And so many times I realize that like I have like totally immersed myself in someone else's world, or in their thoughts, or their what's going on, their emotions and all of that. And I have to like literally like pull myself out.
Wow.
And then I'm like, oh, and then I can breathe. So one of the best ways that I have found for myself to explain it is like, you have a huge stew pot, and in the stew pot is like, you know, your carrots and your celery and beets, whatever you want to put in it, and apples. Well, or you're the apple in that stew pot, and you're swimming around with like all these like vegetables and everything else, and you get all coated and covered and immersed in mucky in it. And so you can't decipher who you are amongst everybody and everything else.
This is awesome. This is like, wow, how many coats and layers and masks have we put on just to look like the other, and to go into their world and to get to understand them better? Because what do you do as an apple in a vegetable stew?
You swim around with everybody.
What if you don't know to swim, or you're afraid of water like I am? Then you're fried from the first sentence.
Then you get really mushy and you start to disintegrate, and then you melt into everybody else's, into all the stew. Yeah. And it is where we try to go in and understand why people choose what they're choosing, or we try to relate to them. So we find a way to understand them. And a lot of times with that, we lose who we are and what we know. So what I always imagine is taking that apple, who we are, and pulling it out and sitting it onto the brim of the stew pot. And if you're sitting on the brim of the stew pot, you can look in and be like, oh my gosh, that's such a fabulous stew. I love you. How yummy, but you don't have to be swimming in it. And then you can also be on the brim of it and look around and be like, oh my God, there's all of this available out here that I didn't even see because I was stuck in the stew pot.
Actually, I'm like, I can get, I really can get that feel of, oh yeah, I don't have to be part of it all. I did my best. It doesn't work for me. And wow, there's so much out there.
Yeah. And so when you sit on the brim, it allows you to be aware of what's going on in other people's worlds without actually having to immerse yourself in it, and be like, okay, who can I be with them with this? And also to be aware of all the other possibilities that you haven't been aware of because you were so stuck in their reality, in their stew. So when you're sitting on that brim, you get to look around and be like, oh my gosh, what else? What else? What else is possible? If I were being me with all of this, what else would I choose? And so that explanation and that visual has helped me immensely, being able to, like, when there's just times when I walk around, I'm like, God, what is it? Like, I feel like I'm like, just like coated with something. And I'm like, oh, wait, whose reality am I in? Who am I aware of? And then and I'm like, okay, if I were me with this, who would I be? And that's when I am able to, that question allows me to pull myself out of that stew of their reality.
You know what comes to me? I mean, like, when you're saying like, ooh, in whose reality am I walking, or in whose reality am I? It's like, how much are we used to the ugliness of the reality of others, that we are not really looking for the, for the brightness in us.
Yeah.
And because we do it so easily. I mean, if you're listening to this video, or watching this, listening to the video. Yeah, I do. I listen to the videos. I'm sorry. if you're doing the same thing, then you know why you're here. I mean, is it too far from me to, suppose that at times you could use this question, who am I being and whose reality am I diving into? Whoa. And what would it take to be on that brim and look at the bright side?
Yes, because we do such a good job of knowing what everybody else desires and requires in their life. And then we're like, well, what is it that we really desire? What is it we really require? And a lot of times we don't even have clarity with that. We don't even have an answer for that because we're so good at knowing what it is for everybody else. So this question also helps with that. I'd be like, oh, what would I choose here? And who am I with all of this? Instead of constantly, I mean, it's a gift. It's a total gift and a total capacity to know what's required in everybody else's, what they need in their life and their living, but not to get so immersed in it that you lose yourself in it and not creating your own life.
This brings me to another question, and I'm not serious about that. So even if it's just like me thinking, when I have this face back, I'm thinking, not quite. My question would be, how do you know when you're you? I mean, how do you know when you okay, so this is the soup, I'm the apple, I lived for 40 years in that wonderful, gorgeous soup. Now I sit on the brim. How do I know that what I am when I ask this question is really who I am? And how do I get to that, this is what I choose and this is not what everybody else would have chosen, just because I'm used to those kind of choices and they come easier to me.
Yeah.
So how do you know?
For me, it's when I actually feel like I'm being more of me and I ask that question, I pull myself out and sit on that brim, there's like that coding that I was talking about, like where you kind of just feel like that. It's almost like feeling like you're stuck in a cobweb.
Oh, so you're not playing Spider-Man right now. You're the victim of Spider-Man.
Eat me!
Do it again. I like...
Eat me!
Yeah.
So when I'm actually being me, I feel like that stickiness of being stuck leaves and that coating is gone, and so I don't feel so dense and heavy. Like there's more of a lightness and a vibrancy to, I'm like, oh wow. And what you're talking about, your first question and your second question is about having fun. And then I'm like, when I'm really being me, there's a joy that percolates. There's that childlike wonder that immerses and comes forth, that when I'm so stuck in everything else, it's not there. It's there, but it's covered up with everything else. So to me, that's what shows up in my world. And how did I get clarity around that? Asking a lot, all the time. If I were being me with this, what would I choose? What would I be? And being like, okay. And then also I also took the question, if I were being me with, for instance, money, my body, my business, and I would take a piece of paper, for each one of those and put money and then write down the first things that pop. If I were being like, for me with money, I would be like, okay, I work hard for money. Money's fun. Like anything positive, negative, whatever, it all came up. And then I would look at the list and I'd go through the list and ask, okay, if I were truly being me, is that what I would choose? Is that me? And like for money, as an example, I looked at, because I've been so ingrained to work really hard for money. And I mean, that's still there for me, but I get that is really not my reality. My reality is when I think of money, like it flows, ebbs and flows, and it's joyful and it's fun. It's just another form of energy. And so it's just, And when I'm being that space with money, it shows up so much easier than when I'm like, raw, I have to work so hard for it. And then when I got that realization of like, oh my God, I'm so ingrained with working hard, I was like, huh. And I looked at like family patterns and all of that as an example. And I'm like, oh, well, my parents, my dad, he's instilled in us very well that you have to work really hard for money. And I'm like, well, is that actually how that works for me? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no. So it was really asking a lot of questions and constantly doing that. Anything that comes up where I felt like a little like poke or like stuck in that web, and then writing it down and getting clarity of like, oh, okay, that's really not mine.
Ooh, you know what comes to me? It's like when you discover that the way you're being with money or with your body, in my life, let's say my body has been a major point of concern ever since I came to this world. But the thing is, to me, it was, I discovered some patterns I've been taking over from my mom, for example. And I also surprised myself that I was not really willing to give them up, as if I really gave them up, it meant that I'm no longer her daughter. I don't know how to explain that. So has it ever happened to you that you come across certain points of view that are sticky, that you know that they are not yours, and yet there's this pinch of heart that says, maybe not.
Yeah, there's a lot, because that's a lot of times those like points of views or perceptions or whatever we have that stick us, they've been created for whatever reason, to be able to relate, to have that connection with somebody or something. And when you're like, oh wait, and you pull it out, then you're like, oh, because yeah, it doesn't really always, it may create a little bit of different, and sometimes that may show up as a little bit of like chaos or havoc, because your relationship kind of changes that way because you see things differently. But how much more freedom do you have to be like, and not become that like doormat of having somebody walk over you because you have a point of view, like, if I don't let that go, I'm not going to have a relationship with my mother anymore. What if you could actually have a greater relationship with your mother if you didn't, like, what other, like that brim, like what other possibilities exist? Like, what if she shows up differently, and you guys can have just even more fun? But it's one of those things that you actually have to, like you said at the beginning, you have to choose. It's a choice, and you have to choose that. And it can be a little scary.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because to me, you can choose it here, but it's not yet here.
Yeah.
So then you go to the pod, and you like a spray, pod everything and anything, and then you smell like fresh new air if you want, because all the stuff is going on, but you still not choose. So you're still an apple with a vegetable stew coating.
You have vegetable deodorant on.
You stink like horseradish. that's but that's something that, even with money, for example, that you were saying that you would take that piece of paper and write down all the points of view. And if I were myself, or if I were me with money, what would I choose? It was for me like, when I did the exercise, I didn't do it with like, I did it with, who does this belong to? And then it hit me that even if I knew that this is not who I am, this is not my choice, this is not what I would choose, I still didn't trust my choice. So what would be, like an itty bitty tiny, I don't know, help or hint or tip or top for people who are just, getting to this question for the first time, and saying, okay, if I myself with this, who am I being first to start with? And what if they don't like who they are being? I know.
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes up, because when I've done it too, I'm like, is that really who I'm being? I'm like, oh, or is that really me? Yeah. And it's just part of the process. But like, I would say trust yourself, like trust yourself, because you're far greater than what you can imagine. And it's there, but a lot of times we make ourselves so wrong for all of those things. And then we question, we're like, no, that can't really be true. But it does show up. I mean, like, I have tons of stuff with my body too. Like there's all of that shows up. And like, even like with business, like with my business for so long, and I still do to a degree. So, I mean, it's a process. Make myself wrong because I'm like, guys, I really suck at business. Like I can't, like I work so hard. Blah, blah, blah. But then I looked at it, and because I've had other people help me along the way, and I'm like, okay, wait, maybe I'm not near as bad or wrong with this as I thought I was.
You're not as fucked up as you think you are.
Yes. Because then I'm like, okay, wait, I can actually do this faster than them. And I'm not saying that's the case with everything, but there's so many times that I've showed up and I'm like, oh, wow. And a lot of times what we judge so much about us that we're not good at, that we're wrong with, that there really is a capacity or a strongness underneath that. So you really aren't as fucked up as you think you.
Wait. You judge something as a wrongness, and it's actually a capacity that you have.
Yeah. It really is. There's so many times that we think the biggest things that are wrong about us, and they're really one of our biggest capacities. That's happened over and over, and for me, and I never would believe it, but after I've keep asking and looking, I'm like, oh, that's how that works. I'm like, oh, so I really am not as messed up as I thought I was.
Yeah. I know, while you're talking about that and that you open it up, I actually feel that my body is like, yay. It's like, there's no explanation, or like logical explanation, but there's stuff that my body reacts to, like possibly not reacts, but gets how do you say that? It just reacts to
a response.
A response, like, wow. So shut up, bitch, you've been judging me for this and this and this, and it might be a capacity that you're not willing to see in me.
Yeah.
Like
there's I have the same stuff with my body. I get so many crunchy aches and pains and like so much, and I have asked, and yes, you ebb and flow through it, but like I'm like, oh crap, my body is so aware and it gives me information all the time, and I've made it so wrong because I'm always like, God, what now? Another thing, something else. And like, just like with my stomach hurting, and I'm like, oh, there's actually a joy there that I've not been willing to be. And if I allow myself to be that, then that density and that goes away. Yeah. So that's the whole thing, is like, you don't ever know how it's going to show up. So ask the question, who am I being with this, for any conflict, any crunchiness, any thought, feeling, emotion that comes up, and be like, okay, if I were actually being me with this, who would I be?
No. It's like,
I'll give you like one before we go. Like, I'll give you one like story. I use this tool a lot. Like I work, my background is I'm an occupational therapist, and I work with.
What's that?
I teach you how to have jobs. I'm just kidding. I do not.
No, really, that's absolutely freaking phenomenal. Because I wanted to ask you, so I don't know what your job is. We just connected in Costa Rica and we connected in Australia, and it was just a click. And I knew I want to have more of you. Haha. And then while you were talking about being the apple and the soup and whatever, I was like, oh, and how do you do that when you go to interviews and you know that there's a stew and you know that you're the apple? How to what extent do you stay apple, and to what extent do you want to show them that you can be a soup?
Well,
And
what if that's actually a capacity? Like, what if you can actually blend everywhere and fit nowhere? Like, what if
again.
That's one of my taglines, by the way.
Oh, shoo! Yes, meme. So what did you say again? It was like.
What if you can blend everywhere and fit nowhere? And what if that's not wrong? Like, what if you could be like in an interview and you could totally blend with what was required for you, for them, but you didn't have to actually fit in. You didn't actually have to be whatever they're asking you to be, like whatever job, whatever skill they're asking you to be. What if you could actually be it and do it, but you don't have to become it? You can still be the apple. You can be like, oh yeah, I'm this cool apple, but I'm going to come in today and I'm going to show up as a carrot just for you. And then you, after you leave your job, you're like, okay, now I'm taking off my carrot suit because I'm going to be my apple. So
okay, I'll just do this. I'll just do this. It was very discreet, right? I'm laughing at it. I'm not, because actually you stroke a very sensitive chord with me, and it's been more and more, how should I say, up in the air. Like, yeah. I've been to Brazil, and everybody was coming up to me, talking to me Portuguese, and asking me, why do you talk to us in English? Like, you know, what are you superior to us or something like that? Because I don't speak Portuguese. And everybody thought that I would be Brazilian. And then I went to Argentina and everybody thought I was Argentinian. And then I went to India and they were, okay, now I'm blonde, but I used to be dark haired. And they would come to me and talk, I wouldn't understand the thing. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I cannot help you. And they would look at me and say, I thought you were Indian. And wow. I felt, yeah, now it's a wow. But back then it was like, oh God, what am I doing? Am I willing to be more Indian than the Indians, or am I willing to be more Brazilian than Brazilians? Or so what if you could blend in everywhere and never have to fit in?
Yeah. So like, it's and that's what I'm talking about. We make it so wrong, and it's one of our capacities. Like, that is a capacity to be a chameleon, to be able to go wherever you require to go and be whatever's required and not become it. And that's why this question of who am I being is so dynamic, and there's so much there, because when you're able to do that and you're able to immerse yourself so much in everybody's culture, beliefs, like everything, you're like, and then you're like, okay, but who am I? And what if you can actually be that and be everything else that you are, and it's not wrong, but you don't have to take on like all the projections and all the stuff that they're actually expecting or projecting at you to be. So blend in, but don't become it.
Blend in, but don't become it.
That's a good meme.
That's a good meme. That's a good. Write it down. Right. Blend in, but don't become it.
Yeah.
Trin, you just blew my whole world apart with a question which I know. I mean, I would do the superior bitch. I know this question. Do I?
Well, it's just a whole nother level of taking it. But back to really quick what you're asking, like, I'm an occupational therapist, and that's a whole spectrum in and of itself. But OT works, what I do is I specialize in developmental disabilities and pediatrics. And I work with people, kids, young adults on the spectrum in some form, like ADD, ADHD, OCD, autism, like anxiety. I work a lot with autism, Asperger's. And so I deal with like their sensory systems, like how they perceive things, how they feel things, like with their body. And also we deal with like daily living things, like how do they function? Can you like zip up your coat? Can you put on your socks? Can you cook a simple meal? And then also like just functional fine motor stuff, like handwriting, and it's a huge gamut. But the biggest thing is like getting you to be able to engage in your environment and your surroundings. And so that's what I do as an OT. And I've used these tools going into schools, group homes, like private sessions, one-on-one in-home therapy. And one time I was at a school for more severe kiddos, and a lot of them are nonverbal. And there was a girl there this one day, one of the girls that I worked with, and we had a substitute teacher, and she said a few words and stuff, but she, stemmed a lot, did a lot of different things. And that day, the substitute teacher, she was just like enraged, like not the teacher, but the kid. And she was throwing chairs, tipped over desk. Like, I was like, what is happening? And like, just like rah. And so I went up to her, and she was like, after she threw, I think she tipped over a desk and threw a chair and did something else. I went up to her and I said, without like judging her for what she was doing, although I was like, what's happening? I was like, who are you being? And I just asked that question. I just went, who are you being? I stopped, didn't say anything else. I was just space. Stood there for a little bit, walked away because she was trying to grab my ankles. And I said, if you were being you, who would you be?
Whoa.
And then I left. I was still in the room, but like I walked away from her and engaged with another child. So I wasn't putting that energy into her, and I let her and be on the floor. She was tantruming, like hitting herself and stuff on the floor. And she finally just stopped. And then I was walking by her to go get something, and she goes, I sorry. I not being mean.
Wow.
And it like, she was different for the rest of the day. It was the craziest thing. And she like got it. She got it. And this is someone who doesn't have, the highest intellect, and also didn't have a lot of words. And that's all I did was I was like, who are you being? It's because I like called her out on like, I'm like, whatever you're doing is like not you, and I just called her out on it, and she was like, oh, and it stopped and it changed.
I just, wow.
Yeah.
That's.
And every situation is different, but that is why that question is like amazing. It's one of my favorite questions.
Well, I kind of get that. I mean, we've been talking about this question and what for wide applicability it has, and it's actually so simple if you're willing to be present with it, and if you choose to be present with it.
Yeah.
Wow, you just give me the chills and the goosebumps. You make me cry. You give me the chills. You turn my whole evening upside down. And I'm so grateful.
How does it get any better? It's because you have a unicorn behind you.
Yeah, I have two.
You have two.
Yeah.
A fluffy one.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? This is that kind of conversation that brings so much more light into however we use the tools, and that perspective of, hey, even if it's not, cognitively I know how imposing, or how should I say, it's not yeah. It works. You don't have to know how it works. It works, and it's so simple. And thank you so, so, so much for sharing these stories with me. They are not stories, they are examples. I would like to insist on this. They are not stories, they are examples. And how much more are we willing to, to see us, to see the apple that we are, when you come and present the apple in such a nice light, such a vibrant, possibility. It can be done different. It's just a simple question.
So thank you for the conversation, and
thank you. I mean, you thank me, I thank you. Absolutely phenomenal. Wow. Thank you for that. And how much more is now possible for everybody watching. But before you go, because you're not going to go, if people want to stalk you,
stalk me.
Yeah. And if they want to find you, and if they want to connect with you, where can they do that?
You can find me at my website, trinarice.com, TRINARICE.com.
For those who listen to the videos.
Yes. And I'm also on Facebook, on all your social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So you can find me there. And just a tidbit of information, like I'm working on some stuff, and I'm actually going to be coming out with a podcast soon. And so I will have tips and tools on that. Yeah, and it's going to be called the Misfit Squad.
Do you get chameleons in there?
So that will be another place that you can find me. We'll have it up on YouTube, and other we'll put it out on all the social media and stuff.
Great. How did we get so lucky? Truly and really. Wow. Thank you so much. Once this recording is done, I'm going to ask you to send me all the details. So at the end of the, I will put them down. I don't have those technical skills that they go like this on the video, but they're going to be presented over there. So for everybody who wants to keep in touch with you, to know where to find you. Thank you so much.
We'll just put it in there.
2 lines. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. See you soon.
See you soon somewhere in the world or live. Until then, all of life comes to us with
ease and joy and glory.
Woo!
All right. Bye.
Bye.